They chained him, beat him, humiliated him before 1,000 worlds. But he didn't fight to survive, he fought to be remembered. And when he shattered their throne with nothing but a chain in his will, the galaxy learned that no empire can survive the memory of one man who refuses to kneel. The citadel of Kaersharn loomed against a blood-red sky, its spires clawing into the choking clouds like the fingers of a dying god. Beneath it, on the broad steps polished smooth by centuries of subjugation, a lone human knelt. Barefoot. Shackled. His skin torn from 1,000 lashes, his back a tapestry of scars both new and old. His head bowed under the weight of 1,000 watching eyes, yet there was no tremble in his limbs. No supplication. Only silence. From the balconies high above, the assembled lords of the Altherian dominion looked down, cloaked in silver and black, faces hidden behind lacquered masks that gleamed with contempt. Among them, seated upon the throne of ascendancy, lounged the Empress herself, Isra Voltaire, the undying sun. She observed the man with idle amusement, swirling a goblet of crystalline fire wine in one delicate hand. Her voice, smooth as venom, rolled over the steps and echoed into the vast amphitheater. A human, she mused aloud. A creature of meat and ignorance, daring to challenge our divine order. The crowd rippled with laughter. Bitter. Arrogant. Isra leaned forward, her golden eyes narrowing. You defied the consul's edicts. Sabotaged 3 supply lines. Killed my herald with your bare hands. She let the silence linger, savoring it. And yet here you kneel. Broken. Beaten. Just as it was always destined to be. Still, he did not speak. The Empress rose slowly, robes of woven starlight cascading around her as if even light itself bowed to her will. She descended the steps of the throne, each step a pronouncement of her dominion, each footfall heavy with ritual significance. When she reached him, she crouched gracefully, lifting his chin with one lacquered finger. His eyes met hers. And in that instant, a spark passed between them, so faint that only the oldest souls among the audience flinched instinctively, feeling an ancient warning stirring in their blood. For in those human eyes there was no despair, no fear, only something infinitely worse. Patience. Isra smiled, slow and cruel, and struck him across the face with the back of her hand. The crack of impact echoed across the great stone square, reverberating through the bones of the onlookers. The human's head snapped sideways, blood spraying from his split lip. He turned back to her. Slowly, deliberately, and smiled. A small, broken smile. But it was enough. A shiver ran down the Empress's spine, alien and unwelcome. For a fraction of a heartbeat, she felt small. She surged to her feet, fury coloring her voice. Chain him to the pillar of judgment, she commanded. Let the people see what becomes of defiance. The guards obeyed at once, dragging the human roughly across the stones. They lashed into the obsidian pillar that had stood since before the Dominion itself, a monument to all who had been crushed beneath its rise. The Empress raised her arms to the sky, and the gathered lords chanted the old oaths of supremacy. Drones buzzed overhead, broadcasting the scene to 100 worlds. This is your fate, she intoned, her voice amplified across the galaxy. This is the fate of all who dare oppose the eternal dominion. As the chanting rose to a fever pitch, she descended once more, standing before him with the ceremonial blade of verdict in hand, a slender weapon of pure energy, designed not for mercy but for spectacle. She pressed the blade's cold tip against his chest. In your final breath, she said, voice low enough only he could hear, you will know that you were nothing. The human smiled again, a smile not born of defiance, nor madness, but of certainty. He whispered 2 words, words that would be lost to the drone feeds, words that would never be recorded in the Dominion's official histories, words that would, nonetheless, spread like a virus across the stars. You first. The Empress blinked, confused. And that was when it began. The human shifted his weight, imperceptibly, but enough. Chains that had appeared tight were suddenly loose. Shackles that had seemed secure now slid free with practiced precision. And before the guards or the Empress could react, he moved. Swift as thought. Savage as survival. He twisted, grabbing the ceremonial blade from her stunned grasp, reversing it in a flash of light, and driving the hilt into the throat of the nearest guard. The man crumpled without a sound. The human spun, using the heavy chain still looped around his wrist as a flail, striking another guard across the helmet, shattering the reinforced plating with the sheer force of the blow. Panic rippled through the watching lords. The drones stuttered in their flight paths. The crowd gasped as the Empress stumbled backward, shock written plain across her perfect face. The human did not hesitate. He did not grandstand. He did not roar triumphantly. He moved with grim efficiency, disabling 3 more guards in as many seconds, leaving a trail of broken bodies and broken illusions in his wake. And then he turned, slowly, to face the Empress once more. Blood dripped from his hands, steaming against the cold stones. The shattered chain dangled like a serpent from his arm. He took 1 step forward. The Empress retreated. Another step. The lords began to back away. Another step. The spectators froze, caught between terror and awe. The human climbed the steps. toward the throne, toward the heart of everything. And not a soul moved to stop him, because deep down they understood. Power was an illusion, and today they were watching it shatter. Each step the human took up the steps of the citadel was a hammer blow against the foundations of the Dominion's illusion. Each heartbeat that passed without a blade stopping him was a drumbeat of revelation for every soul watching. Isra Voltaire, Empress Eternal, the undying sun, the unbroken voice of the ascendancy, she stumbled backward like a cornered beast, her perfect mask fracturing under the unbearable weight of reality. The human ascended slowly, deliberately. No rush, no panic. Because humans understood something the Dominion had long forgotten. Fear ripens when left to grow. Behind him, the chains clattered along the stone steps, each metallic scrape carving another line in the eulogy of the Empress's reign. At the base of the throne platform, the honor guard hesitated. These were not common soldiers. They were her finest, warriors selected from 1,000 bloodlines, augmented with the finest technology, loyal unto death. But loyalty faltered before inevitability. Their hands tightened on their energy halberds. Their feet shifted uncertainly, because even they could see it now. He wasn't coming for mercy. He wasn't coming for vengeance. He was coming for memory. The human paused at the final step. He lifted his gaze, not to the throne, to the banners above it. Banners woven from the flesh of conquered worlds. Banners drenched in the lies of centuries. He raised the broken chain in his hand, and with a single, deliberate movement, he threw it. The chain coiled around the central banner, the oldest, the most sacred, the black standard of the Dominion itself. With a savage pull, the banner ripped free from its mount, collapsing onto the Empress's dais like the corpse of an idea long dead. The gasp that echoed across the balconies was not mere shock. It was mourning. Mourning for the death of certainty. The honor guard moved at last, driven more by the fear of standing idle than by faith. 12 armored figures charged as one. The human met them, not with a roar, not with a battle cry, with silence. The first swung wide with his halberd, energy blade hissing through the air. The human ducked beneath it, stepped inside the guard's reach, and drove a brutal elbow into the joint of the armor. The reinforced plating cracked audibly. A second blow, swift, merciless, to the throat, and the guard crumpled. Another swung low. The human sidestepped, seized the halberd shaft, twisted it, and wrenched it free. He moved with the weapon like a natural extension of his will, slashing it across 2 more guards before they could adjust. 3 down. 9 remained. They formed a semicircle around him, tactical programming kicking in. Adapt, encircle, overwhelm. The human smiled. A small, grim twist of his battered lips. He surged forward, not backward, because humans don't survive by retreating. They survive by ending the threat. The halberd whirled in his hands, striking faster than thought, using the guard's own tight formation against them. A lunge from the left, he dropped low, sweeping the legs out from under 2 with a single spinning strike. A thrust from the right, he caught the blade on the reinforced shaft of his stolen weapon, pivoted, and slammed his shoulder into the attacker's chest plate, sending him sprawling. 7 remained. Another strike. Another parry. Another fall. The rhythm of survival, ancient and unbreakable. Blood, violet and crimson, splattered across the pristine white stones. The crowd above did not cheer. They watched, silent, frozen, learning a lesson long buried. Humans bleed. Humans break. But when they choose to stand, truly stand, they cannot be stopped. For guards rushed him at once in a desperate surge. The human met them head-on. He ducked a swing, drove his knee into a gut, disarmed one, and used his weapon to shatter the visor of another. A blur of brutal, perfect violence. 2 guards hesitated. Fatal mistake. The human closed the distance in 2 strides, dropping one with a savage elbow strike and hurling the last against the stone plinth of the throne. 12 guards. 12 failures. The Empress stepped backward, lips parted in silent horror. The human stood alone, surrounded by fallen bodies. Banners torn, bloodied but unbowed. He turned his gaze on her once more. Not with hatred, not even with contempt. With disappointment, as if she were not worth the anger anymore. He dropped the halberd at his feet with a metallic clang that echoed like a death knell through the hall. And then he did the unthinkable. He climbed the final steps. Not to seize the throne, not to sit upon it, but to destroy it. He gripped the obsidian chair, the very symbol of the Dominion's right to rule, and, with a cry wrenched from the depths of his battered lungs, he heaved. The stone groaned, cracked, splintered, and under the strength of one broken human, it shattered into ruin. Dust billowed outward. Pebbles clattered down the steps. And with it, the illusion fell. The Empress stumbled backward, choking on dust and disbelief. All around, nobles fled in chaos, their masks discarded, their titles meaningless. The human stood atop the rubble, breathing heavily, looking out across the ruin he had wrought not with armies, not with fleets, not with weapons of mass destruction, with himself, and with the truth. Tyranny crumbles not when it is challenged with violence. It crumbles when it is reminded that it was never real to begin with. He stepped down from the dais slowly, every movement deliberate, as if he had all the time in the universe. Because he did. Because now time belonged to him. The Empress fell to her knees, robes trailing in the dust, crown slipping from her brow. And for the first time in her reign, Isra Voltaire, the undying sun, wept, not from pain, not from fear, from understanding. She had ruled through fear, through spectacle, through the illusion of invincibility. And with a broken chain and bare hands, a human had shown the stars that even gods can bleed. The footage spread faster than light. By the time the human descended the last steps of the ruined throne platform, the image had already crossed systems, slipped through firewalls, bypassed Dominion censorship protocols built to withstand the wars of centuries. Every screen, every public square, every training hall, every noble court, they all showed the same image. A barefoot human, bloodied and scarred, standing atop the shattered remains of the throne of ascendancy. Alone, victorious, undeniable. On the moonworlds of Iliaris, students gathered around stolen projectors, hands clasped to mouths in stunned silence. In the mines of Zerith, slaves paused mid-shift, heads lifting toward the cracked holoscreens hung above them, tools falling forgotten from calloused hands. On the fortress stations orbiting Tor Valis, even hardened fleet admirals leaned forward in their chairs, unable to look away from the side of power undone not by plasma fire, not by quantum warheads, but by the will of a single, wounded man. The galaxy had seen revolutions before, had watched rebellions ignite and collapse like so many sparks upon the cold stone of history. But this was different. This was a mirror, held up to the face of every tyrant, every conqueror, every self-proclaimed god. And it showed them the truth. Their power was nothing but fear, and fear could be broken. The Empress was not executed. She was not paraded through the streets in chains. No, her punishment was far worse. She lived. She remained, forced to walk through the ruins of her citadel, forced to hear the whispers grow louder with each passing day. One man, one chain, one throne shattered. The Dominion fractured in less than 30 days. First went the outer colonies, emboldened by the sight of their undying Empress weeping in the dust. They tore down her statues, burned her banners, and declared themselves free. Then the military garrison splintered, loyalty codes ignored, chain of command severed not by insurgency, but by simple, contagious doubt. Admirals surrendered their fleets without firing a shot. Governors opened their palaces to the people. The aristocracy, once so certain of their divine right, scrambled for off-world transports, abandoning planets they had ruled for generations. And the human? Gone. Vanished like smoke. No broadcasts. No manifestos. No declarations. Because he didn't need them. He had already spoken in a language more ancient than politics. A language carved into stone and bone. Stand. Fight. Endure. And when the time is right, make them remember. Songs were written in the streets of fallen cities, old melodies twisted into new anthems of defiance. They spoke not of armies or weapons or even battles. They spoke of memory. The man who refused to kneel. The chain that broke the world. The throne that crumbled not from assault, but from the weight of its own rot when someone finally dared to call it hollow. Some called him the chain bearer. Others the last witness. Still others, simply the reminder. Because that's what he was now. A living wound in the mind of every ruler who rose from the ashes. A shadow at every coronation. A whisper behind every council meeting. Remember Solkarth. Remember the throne of dust. Remember the man who showed us the truth. In the years that followed, new governments rose. Different faces. Different flags. Same temptation, power without accountability. But every time they tried to rebuild the old systems of fear and cruelty, a chain would appear, wrapped around a monument, hung from a palace gate, coiled like a question at the base of a new throne. Sometimes just a piece of chain. Sometimes a stone, rough and bloody. Sometimes nothing but a smear of red across pristine white floors. And rulers would pause. Their hands would tremble before signing unjust decrees. Their voices would falter before ordering massacres. Because memory, once ignited, burns hotter than any sun. And fear of the reminder spread wider and deeper than any army ever could. On the anniversary of the fall, across liberated worlds, bells rang, not in mourning, in warning, a reminder to every soul. Freedom is not given, it is taken, and it is kept alive not by banners or thrones, but by the unbroken will of those who dare to stand, even when chained, especially when chained. And somewhere, beyond the reach of any broadcast, walking through the forgotten places where empires once rose and fell, a scarred man kept moving. No title, no army, no need for either, because the stars themselves whispered his legacy. One man, one chain, 1,000 broken crowns. It was not the armies that kept the peace. It was not the fleets patrolling the trade lanes. It was not the treaties signed in trembling hands. It was the memory of a man in chains who refused to bow, a man who walked through blood and fire and did not kneel. The reminder. Years passed. New rulers rose, cautious and clever, speaking words of justice and unity. Yet beneath their gilded speeches, they all knew the truth. They were not feared. He was. It began with whispers at coronations. As the new Queen of Valor stood to accept the circlet of sovereignty, a figure in the crowd did not cheer. He did not kneel. He simply watched. Wrapped in a weathered cloak, the hint of a chain glinting at his wrist in the firelight. She stumbled mid-speech, heart thudding against ribs too fragile to hold pride. And when she looked again, he was gone. But the silence he left behind roared louder than any anthem. In the merchant courts of Zereth Minor, when governors gathered to divide the spoils of newly conquered colonies, they found a stone resting at the center of their council table. Small, rough, stained with something that could have been blood or could have been memory. They argued, panicked, accused each other. No one confessed to bringing it. No one dared touch it. The meeting dissolved. The conquest abandoned. Because the reminder needed no army, no banners, just presence, or even the fear of it. In the fortress city of Draws, carved into the bones of a dead god, a general plotted a war to reclaim the lost sectors. Her armies were vast, her ships endless. But the night before the grand offensive, she found a broken chain draped across the entrance to her war room. No note, no threat, just that. And though her advisors urged her to proceed, citing superior numbers and tactical supremacy, she canceled the operation. Publicly, she claimed logistics. Privately, she knew. It was not logistics she feared. It was the reminder. Because somewhere in the void, he was still watching, still weighing, still waiting. And if she forgot, if she dared treat her people like chattel, if she dared laugh at the memory of Solkarth, he would come, and she would fall, just as surely as Isra Voltaire had. The reminder became legend among soldiers, among students, among slaves and merchants and kings. In the hidden schools of the outer reach, children learned the old mantra before they could recite their own names. Chains can bind flesh. Chains cannot bind memory. We remember. On the devastated world of Karist, a young poet carved it into the ruins of a collapsed palace. On the farming colonies of Argenthuli, elders whispered it as a blessing over newborns. And on the shattered moons of Solkarth, now left as a silent monument to hubris, pilgrims left offerings at the broken dais where the throne once stood. Not offerings of gold or jewels, but stones and chains, rusting in the starlight. Symbols stronger than any empire ever built. Meanwhile, the man himself, if he still lived, never claimed a world, never accepted a title, never asked for worship. Because that was never the point. The point was not to rule. The point was to remind. Every new ruler who thought themselves immune to the old lessons, who thought the reminder was just a story to scare the weak, they learned quickly. Sometimes it was a chain nailed to the gates of their palace. Sometimes a bloodied stone left on their pillow in the dead of night. Sometimes nothing more than a shadow across a crowded plaza, a figure glimpsed in the corner of their vision, never confirmed, never caught. But it was enough. It was always enough. And so power, once seized through fear, began to be held through humility. Not because the rulers grew wiser, because they grew afraid. Afraid of the man who had shattered an empire with nothing but blood, bone, and memory. Afraid of the silence that followed his steps. Afraid that somewhere, out there, the reminder still watched. Waiting, not to strike, but to witness. To ensure that the chain, once broken, was never reforged. And if someone was foolish enough to try, if they dared believe again in the invincibility of their crowns, if they laughed, as Isra Voltaire had laughed, then the reminder would return, and memory would rise again like a tide no empire could withstand. It began subtly. No proclamations, no great councils, no formal doctrines, just changes. Small, inevitable, everywhere. New rulers, cautious and trembling, restructured their courts. Thrones were lowered. Crowns were made simpler, lighter, stripped of gems, stripped of arrogance. Oaths were rewritten, not to gods or empires, but to the people. Not because of idealism, not because of enlightenment, because of fear. Fear of memory, fear of the reminder. When governors visited conquered worlds, they stepped lightly. When judges passed sentences, they did so with trembling hands, ensuring that even the guilty were not made spectacles. Public executions faded into rare and somber affairs, stripped of the pomp that once fed the vanity of conquerors. Because they knew, somewhere in the watching crowd, among the silent faces, could be a figure cloaked in dust, a chain wrapped lazily around a wrist. Maybe he would say nothing. Maybe he would simply watch. But his gaze alone would be enough to bring down the proudest walls. Across the galaxy, the old symbols of power, scepters, banners, golden thrones, became objects of unease. On planets like Veldras, entire palaces were dismantled stone by stone, by order of their own rulers. On Valor Prime, the Grand Admiral of the Spire Fleet resigned his post the day a simple pebble was found placed on his command console. No blood, no note, no violence. Just memory. In the heart of the Inner Reach, a summit of new kings and queens gathered. desperate to preserve their fledgling order. They drafted the Articles of Endurance, a pact sworn not to power, but to restraint, to memory. The first clause was short, only 8 words, carved into the walls of every hall they built. Do not awaken the reminder. And yet, human nature being what it is, pride returned. Slowly, generations passed. The reminder became myth, a story to frighten children, a lesson invoked by cautious tutors, a warning murmured by old soldiers who still remembered what broken banners smelled like when they fell in the dust. But myths, when left unattended, grow blurry. And so, inevitably, someone forgot. On the world of Vassar's Hold, a young emperor rose. Brilliant, charismatic, hungry. He laughed at the old stories, laughed at the idea of one man bringing down an empire. He ordered the statues built higher, the crowns heavier, the oaths rewritten in his own name. And on the day he crowned himself in the new temple, he made a speech. Arrogant, drunken on the smell of fresh power, mocking the reminder, mocking memory itself. The crowd laughed with him, nervously at first, then louder, swept up in the intoxicating pull of dominance. Until they saw it. One figure, standing at the edge of the plaza, barefoot, cloaked, silent, a glint of chain across a weathered wrist. The laughter died in an instant. The emperor faltered mid-sentence. The gathered lords and ladies turned pale, their eyes darting between the newcomer and their young sovereign. The figure did not move, did not speak. He simply stood, and memory surged back like a dam breaking. The plaza emptied in minutes. The new emperor's guards refused to draw their weapons. His ministers abandoned their posts. Even his own family fled into the alleys, leaving him alone before the reminder. They found the emperor the next morning, alive, unharmed, but different. He abdicated the same day, crown left hanging on the temple doors. He entered exile willingly, never to be seen again, because the reminder did not need to kill. He did not need to conquer. His weapon was older, more enduring. He made them remember, and that was enough. Across the systems, the old warnings reawakened. Children learned again to whisper the words before sleep. Soldiers stitched them into the linings of their uniforms. Rulers carved them into their halls, into their bones. Chains can break. Memory cannot. And every year, when the red moons of Solkarth aligned, bells rang again across 1,000 worlds. Not in mourning, not in celebration. In reminder that freedom was not safe. That vigilance was not a luxury. That somewhere, maybe in the crowd, maybe in the shadows, maybe in the beating hearts of the lowliest of servants, the reminder waited. Not to destroy, not to rule, but to ensure that no one forgot what arrogance costs, and what one human can do. When he decides never to kneel again, he became more than a man, more than a shadow, more than a story. He became a current running beneath the skin of every world that once knew chains. On the frozen outposts beyond the outer rim, children played games not of kings and conquerors, but of the reminder, acting out the fall of thrones with sticks and stones. On the glittering arcologies of New Sulan, historians wove his silent rebellion into the foundational myths, teaching that a throne built on fear could never last. No image survived of his face. No name was inscribed in any official record. But the chain remained. The rock remained. And the memory of a human, barefoot and bloodied, standing unbroken before all the cruelty of an empire that remained most of all. Centuries later, long after the Dominion's last banner rotted away in forgotten ruins, travelers spoke of glimpses. A scarred figure seen boarding a dying freighter bound for the edge of the known galaxy. A silent passenger walking the dust-choked streets of derelict colonies, pausing to tie a strip of frayed cloth to a crumbling monument before vanishing into the night. A man who left no footprints, only shivers down the spines of those who thought themselves untouchable. Some said he was long dead, and it was merely men who bore his memory forward. Some believed he had become something more, a guardian spirit of broken people, the echo of an idea too fierce to die. The truth didn't matter. The result was the same. On worlds where new rulers were crowned, it became custom to leave a broken chain draped across the foot of the throne. A warning, a prayer, a promise. And when the coronation bells rang out, no matter how far or wide, there was always a moment, a breath held, as the new sovereign scanned the faces of the crowd. Because even centuries later, they still looked. They still feared. They still remembered. In one of the last surviving journals of the old empire, penned by a scribe who had witnessed the fall firsthand, a passage was found carved into the back cover. We built monuments to our glory, but he tore them down with a glance. We forged chains to bind him, but he wore them as a crown. We crowned ourselves gods, but he reminded us we are mortal. Never again shall we forget. Never again shall we kneel blindly. Because he showed us. Even one human, when memory is his weapon, can burn empires to ash. The stars shifted. Civilizations rose and fell. The galaxy spun on. But in the cracks of forgotten palaces, in the haunted ruins where ambition once towered, stones still rested quietly. Chains still lay coiled in silent accusation, waiting. And should any ruler, drunk on their own power, dare laugh at memory again now. The reminder would return. Or perhaps he had never left. Perhaps he was in every hand that refused to kneel, in every voice that spoke truth to thrones, in every heart that dared to believe that even broken, even bloodied, even alone, a human could still change everything.